Welcome to the Blatchford Coaching Systems Podcast, where we share over 40 years of wisdom on the business of dentistry. We help maximize efficiency, minimize stress, and give dentists a better life-work balance.
O'Keefe, and I'm here with one of my virtual mentors, someone I've admired for a super long time, Dr. Bill Blatchford. Bill, how do you want to start? I want to give everyone a little bit of background as if they've never met you, because I think something that you did, when I worked with I worked with thousands of dentists. I came at it from the how do we attract patients who are pre-educated, pre-qualified before they ever call the office. And when I listened to one of your interviews with Perry Marshall on 80-20 rule, and I've listened to probably a dozen of your podcasts when you talk about the power questions and the systems, because I think what you do is so powerful that it's probably the biggest exponential leverage point on many levels prior to even spending more money on getting new patients.
Well, that's right. I think the biggest thing there is that I've been doing this for 40 years. And what I found was that every dentist wants more new patients. But after practicing for 20 years, one of the things that I found was that people weren't really, dentists and their teams weren't trained to really deal effectively with those patients once they got to the office. And we really studied. This was my passion when I was practicing, to the point where I hired a psychiatrist to work with several other dentists and myself. And we really learned how to listen to patients. And I think that was the big difference, is we listen to the patients to find out what they really want.
One of the things you said, not directly to me, but in your podcast and in your trainings, is high growth, low profit. It's like you guys specialize in practices that are trying to just let's get more patients, let's expand, let's take on more debt, let's do all this stuff. And I have this high growth. And then I wake up one day because I've listened to other consultants who are telling me to grow. And I got to call Blatchford Solutions because I have no profit and I'm working harder and longer than I've ever done before. So walk me through that paradigm shift that you help doctors go through.
I did practice for 20 years in a small town in Oregon. And at that time, a $250,000 practice was a good sized practice. That was kind of the epitome. There was a group that was trying to develop the $500,000 practice, and I did join that group as a participant. It was called Quest. I joined that, and it was all about growth. It was just growth, and I hired a big staff, and I had one goal, one financial goal at the time, and that was to collect $1 million. And you can play with that a little bit. It was, crowns were $275 to $300 at that time, and so that was a large practice. And we had the huge new patient flow. We had all of that going. And I took home about $300,000 of that, which was a good income. It was an excellent income in 19. It was by the mid 80s, we'll say 85, 86, somewhere in there. But I had a good friend who was doing 600 and he was taking home 300. In other words, I was doing an extra $400,000 to net the same amount of money. So who's so smart? Well, we had a Christmas party at our house, and we had the staff, their spouses, and their children, and we had live music. We had one of our patients dressed up as Santa Claus and showed up at the house that night. It was just a great party. And early in the evening, my wife asked me, how many people are here? Well, I counted heads, and there were 45 people. Well, that night, after everybody had gone home, and my wife and I are cleaning up the mess and eating a few leftovers. And my wife says, we do this every month. I go, what do you mean? She says, well, we clean up the leftovers and get what's left over. In other words, if we had a slow month, in other words, at 100 a month, at 100,000 a month, you see, I had a nice income. But if my collections dropped to 75 or 80, I had no income. And yet there was this huge practice. So I stayed awake all night. I really did. I didn't sleep that night. And I went down to the office the next day and I said, I'm going to solve this problem. This is not the right direction to be going here. And I said, where can I change this? What can I do to change this? And I started looking at our practice. And I think this was prior. Yes, we were computerized, but our computer would only do billing. It wouldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
And I started looking at expenses. I started looking at where we were making our money. And I started with I developed the 80/20 spreadsheet, by hand. I didn't know anything about Excel spreadsheets at that time. And so I just started doing it by hand. And I started listing all the patients by name and how much money they had spent in our practice in the last 12 months. And then I did a running total. And I found that we collected 80% of our income on about 20% of our patients. So then I identified those patients by every characteristic I could think of. Well, at the same time with that, we had a consultant at the time who wanted us to do more and more hygiene, expand the hygiene department. So I got up to 3 hygienists per day. And then I started looking at the math on that. And if I spend 5 minutes with each hygiene patient, I only get to do dentistry 6 hours a day. If I spend 10 minutes with each patient, I only do dentistry 4 hours a day. So then I started to play with that a little bit, and I started to look at the hygiene model that we were developing of bigger and bigger hygiene. Yeah. Build it and they will come. And even though our hygiene, you see, we had 3 hygienists, we had a full-time person filling the hygiene schedule, and then we had an assistant for hygiene because, the consultant was saying, well, you can't afford to pay hygienists to clean instruments and that sort of thing. So we had an assistant. But when I really started to titrate that hygiene department and look at how many people actually show up, now this was real time. This was not how many people are booked, because every morning in our morning meeting, our hygiene coordinator would show us 3 full columns of hygiene. But I knew in my head that, by 9 o'clock, our schedule was paper at that time, and an arm would come around the corner in my treatment room and scratch out some name in hygiene and add another name or whatever. And by afternoon, they would just scratch them out. They weren't filling them. And what I discovered was, even though we had at that time, I had 10 days a week of hygiene. So I had 3 hygienists 2 days and 2 hygienists 2 days. We only had a demand. So we had capacity for 10 days of hygiene, but we actually had demand for 7.5.
Interesting.
Now think about this. And then I took a look at that, go back to the 80/20 spreadsheet, and where am I making money? And it wasn't in hygiene.
Yeah,
it was in me doing dentistry on the people who came through. Yeah. And so then I said, okay, now what do we do now? So one of the first things we did is we titrated that hygiene capacity back to the actual demand. In other words, I gave up my build it and they will come philosophy.
Which is a different solution. Because what I was listening, I'm like, okay, so then each problem that started occurring is like, okay, well, there's a demand issue. So then the solution, if you're trying to grow, just without looking at what you did, is okay, well, we got to go spend more money on untested advertising, hoping that works. And we need to put a new system in place because we have all these cancellations. So now we got to be filling up other people's things. So we got to hire a girl to do that.
Yes.
And now we got to hire someone to train her, which is taking your hours away from that. So that is a model, right? So that's a model. And so I think there's probably people listening that are hearing they're on that highway of speeding things up and getting more people. And so for you, if I was listening to you right now, I'd be going, wow, yellow flags are popping up all over the place.
Well, here's the thing. You see, what we do with a doctor, with a new client, we start with how much would you like to net? You see, I was on the treadmill. Mm-hmm. I was trying to outrun my overhead. Now, keep in mind, I had 16 employees at that time, 1 doctor, and 5 in the front office trying to keep the schedule full. And they were clamoring for more help. And so I said, wait a minute, we got a really good thing going here, but we got to trim the fat. So what our philosophy is become profitable and then grow.
Yeah.
And I'm all for growth. I mean, we have clients, as you know, that are single doctors that are producing, well into $3 and $4 million without associates. I mean, these are big producers, and I'm all for that.
I'll talk about them in a minute. Yeah, that's amazing.
But I want them to be profitable first, so that they actually they actually get a reward immediately for producing that much or collecting that much. Because what I see so often is they are growing for the sake of growth. And I was doing this. I mean, every metric that we looked at, and the consultants I had, they put me on their little honor roll type, whatever, and I was the example, and, Blatchford's doing $1 million, and how wonderful is that? And I do remember one time the consultant was at our house, and we had just moved in a new facility, quite a few expenses there. And he was talking about how great we were doing. And my wife, who's very astute, smarter than me in most cases, said, well, if we're doing so well, how come we struggle to pay our bills? And he looked right at her and said, Bill's just going to have to do more dentistry. And the thing that we forget.
Wait, your wife asked him that question.
She asked that question. If we're doing so well, shouldn't we just be rolling in cash? And we're not. Again, it was the overhead was very high.
Yeah.
And so sure, I can produce 100,000 a month, collect 100,000 a month. But if my expenses are 90,
yeah,
or 80 or whatever,
which a lot of everyone listening to, like, I mean, $1 million back in 1985 is like 2.2.
Well, I suspect, given the fact that crowns were $300 and now they're at least 12 to 15, and many of our clients are much higher than that, but I would say 3 to 4 million somewhere.
Isn't that something? Yeah. You're so young in spirit, at heart, physicality. You have such a fresh perspective. You live the good and the bad, right? The good, bad, and ugly. And so there's so much wisdom in that. And then also, being down the road where I have 7 kids and a wife that I've been married to so many years, like at the end of the day, our responsibility as CEOs is first and foremost, like, is what I'm doing on a daily basis taking care of my 4 walls at home, number one. And then is what I'm passionate about and what I'm going to go do for a living, is that what I want to do? And how do I become uniquely amazing at that? With the best clients or best patients in the world with a great team. It sounds like that's kind of a framework that you've shifted people from. So I'd like you to talk a little bit more about that, and then shift a little bit, share a couple of examples of clients that, we're on the treadmill that we saw paradigm shifts to be doing, producing high numbers, but high growth or good growth, great profit.
Here's my philosophy. Life is first. And just what you said, taking care of the 4 walls at home and taking care of the family is number one. Life is first. And the way I see it is what we do for a living, a profession, in our case, dentistry, simply supports my life. And what I notice is that so many people, dentists that we're talking to, their practice is number one and their family is somewhere down the list. And I think that probably speaks to the divorce rate. I don't know that dentists have a higher divorce rate than anybody else, but the dissatisfaction rate. They're working really hard. They're putting in a lot of time. And we've run into these doctors who join the program and they're working 60 and 65 hours a week. And then, when we bring somebody in, we call it a summit. We meet with them virtually at this time, and it really works well. And then we have their spouse there. And they'll say, well, I work 4 days a week and 8 hours a day. And then their spouse, either male or female, says, well, it's interesting. You may only work 40 hours a week, but you don't get home till 7:30 at night.
Yeah.
And you are down there on Saturday as well. In other words, they have no life. And sometimes I'll ask, when is the last time you took a vacation? And they have to think. They have to think back years, but they had a vacation. And our philosophy is life is first. Let's design a practice to support that. And I can also say, at 78, I've learned a lot of things. And as my wife and I will say, we're not wealthy, but we're very well off. I mean, we got more than we'll ever spend in our lifetime. And the thing is that I think that if dentists really sat down and talked about with their spouse, what is their number? What is the amount of money that they need to live on, to be able to retire with dignity someday? How much is that? What is that number? And then let's figure out a way to do it. And one of the things that I've seen, and you hit on this, they've got it in their practice. There are people in their practice willing, financially able, and they want comprehensive dentistry, and they're not offering it. They're offering the Crown of the Year Club. They're not offering this. And so one of the things that we do with these doctors is, a very simple exercise. Roughly 90% of all the Crown and Bridge in this country is done one tooth at a time. And so I have them figure out their overhead per hour, have them figure out their income per hour then. And one of the things, if you simply do, would you like fries with your burger, which is a very simple question, but that's the first, we'll call it a sales question. I teach them. I said, I want you to go in and ask, would you like fries with your burger? Oh, I'm sorry. Would you like to do that tooth next to it at the same time? And the return on doing 2 crowns at a time, that's 2 per an appointment. And by the way, it fits any procedure, whether it be 2
in any
implants.
scenario. Yeah. So this is like, what we were asking our listeners, no matter where they're at or what they want to do, is expand it to like just whatever where you're at. We're adding on, because this is add on.
And so what happens is the net return per hour doesn't double, it triples.
Yeah.
It triples with just an additional unit of dentistry. Now, somebody asked me, so what do you do with these doctors who join you? They're kind of set in their ways. Like I mentioned, a lady in Nashville that we kicked up her collections $100,000 a month immediately. Well, that was the first thing we did. We just introduced that question. Simple. And, that, of course, it's a simple stuff. It's the same thing when you go into buy a suit, a man's suit. What do? They sell you shirts and ties and shoes and belts and everything.
Yeah, another suit for half off. Yeah, totally. Today we have an extra. Yeah.
And the automobile industry figured this out years ago. And so we have a model, and nobody buys that stripped down model, but they add on the trim package and the trim package and the trim package, and people gobble it up. Well, in dentistry, it's so simple to sit down and find out what people want and why they want it. And this takes time. I mean, sometimes this can it can take place. You mentioned that telephone conversation, just listening on the phone to people. Why are they calling? Why are they calling now? And you start asking questions, not about their insurance.
Yeah.
Not about that information that everybody gathers. It's what is important to them. And you present a comprehensive plan. And you do talk. An interesting thing is too, you have to be able to willing to speak budget. What is your budget for this?
I was going to ask you about that, because your framework is, let's get the money question early.
Yes.
So we can help them best. And if, and not be taken in and wasting chair time. And I could say it a lot more harsher than I guess you can, why are we wasting time in our office from patients because we gave them misinformation on the phone, and now they're in our office and we have to tell them we're not a good fit for them. So explain that dynamic there. Cause I know you talk budget soon.
Yes. And, my philosophy is very simple. And I did say, I did work with a psychiatrist for 2 years on some of this. And think about this. In any buying situation, what is the one thing that everybody wants to know?
How much it's going to cost?
What's it going to cost?
Yeah.
And so many dental consultants are saying, oh, don't talk money. Don't talk money. Doctors should never talk money. Never talk money on the phone. Wait, we'll get them in. We'll do this comprehensive exam and we'll take all kinds of records and we'll bring them back and have this formal presentation. But we still are not going to talk money until the very end. And then we're going to go out and say, talk to Susie at the front desk.
Yeah.
And she'll tell you how much it's going to cost. And generally, money is not discussed. And I laugh about this until the final 5 minutes of the last time you ever see that patient.
Wow, that's crazy.
And because I've even heard consultants say to the patient, don't even think about money right now. Let's just talk about what your dental health. If I told you not to think about my red glasses for the next few minutes, what's the only thing you're going to think about? So we start right out with, after a few questions about what they want, why they want it, et cetera, and how long they've been thinking about this and different things. Then have you considered a budget? And it's a very simple, honest question. Have you considered a budget? and most people have not, but they've taught. But today, in today's world, where there's so much information on the internet, that people do know. I believe people know basically what things are going to cost before they come in. It's usually not a surprise. And if you think of sales situations, you go to a realtor to buy a home. I mean, within minutes, the question is asked, what is your price range?
So I was listening to a great interview by Christina and Brad, your Dr. Christina and Dr. Brad, who are the lead coaches with Blatchford Coaching and Blatchford Solutions. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
I have everyone. And they were saying a great case study was similar to something I found a lot. Like the reason why people liked pre-educating, like Ed, can we actually pre-educate people again there? Because they didn't want to deal with these hard conversations, but they're really not hard conversations if you look at it as we're helping people. And Brad tells a great story about one of your clients. I forget whose office it was. They lived in an area where, because this is a big myth, they lived in an area where he did all the training. He invested money in any supplies that he would need, right? And he was doing one implant case a month, right? And Dr. Brad started working with him, and he said that the area would be the least typical area where you would want to be producing a lot of implants. Like there's no way this would work here. And within, I don't know the timeline, so forgive me. And I don't really know the number. I know it was something like he's doing 50 implants a month now, where he went from 1 to like 50. And I may have my numbers off a little bit, but how does that happen? Like how is that happening with your clients?
I know who you're talking about, and I don't know. That number is similar, and he has done 50 in a month. I will not say he's doing 50 every month, but I have heard reports of him doing 50 implants in.
That's 5x in a yearly production in a month.
It was very simple. His marketing for the implant patient was working well,
right.
But they were coming into the office, and I will tell you, one time I spoke to a group of perio restorative dentists.
Okay.
It was a big study club. It was a regional. It was in Colorado and something. And they wanted me to talk about how to present and sell implants. And I started out with quit talking about implants. Quit talking about implants, because they had diagrams and models and they were teaching the patient how to do an implant, thinking if I could teach them enough about it, they will say yes to it. And I said, quit talking about implants. Talk about what the patient wants. And let's go back to your mother. What did your mother want?
To eat the food she wants to feed and not fiddle with things and worry about them popping out, period.
Exactly. And so we get the patient telling us that, and we'll say, I can solve that for you.
Totally.
We can replace your teeth. This is the closest thing to what God gave you. And we can do that for you in a few appointments and in a very short period of time. Have you considered a budget for this? But we quit talking about implants.
Yeah.
I don't talk about, and regardless of the type of dentistry that you're doing, back before implants were really so reliable, and today they're so reliable. When we were doing bridges for people to replace teeth, fixed bridges. And the typical dentist, and I did it myself, I had a model of a bridge. And the first thing I would do before I really wised up, a patient would be, well, tell me about the bridge. And the first thing I had this little plastic model, and these dentists all know this, they have one, and it had a bridge on it. And the first thing I do is I'd pull the bridge off the model, and what they would see is 2 little pegs sticking up. And their first question is, well, do you have to cut my teeth down to those little pegs? And I said, so doctors, what is the main advantage of a fixed bridge? Well, it's fixed. It doesn't come out. Then why do you take it out to show it?
Yeah, that's so crazy.
So we quit talking about bridges. I remember one time I got a call from a client, and she was a long-term client of mine, and she did a lot of cosmetics, a lot of crown and bridge. And she says, Bill, today I actually had a bridge accepted, and I never used the term bridge. I never talked about abutments. I never talked about phonics. I didn't talk about that. And the patient says, well, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to do that. And she was so shocked. She didn't have to teach the patient how to do a bridge. Well, it's the same with implants.
Yeah.
Quit talking about implants and get the patient to tell you, like your mother told you. And those are the benefits that you speak to.
Yeah.
Not the metallurgy of the implant or how you're going to do it.
Before we wrap this call up, I want you to kind of walk through how you guys create good frameworks and questions that are easy to answer, goes right into allowing patients to say what they want, and also gives the doctor the confidence to close high-end cases without looking salesy, because I know that's the number one concern, right?
Well, it is. But we were chosen to go to dental school because we got excellent grades in those real emotional courses like physics and math and organic chemistry. And so we were good at that sort of thing. We really were. And we were very good at the sciences. Our two daughters grew up with this, and I still read. The magazines I watch for to come are Scientific American and Popular Mechanics. I mean, that's what I love that. So dentists are very left brain. The left brain is the logical side. It's the side we process data with. And the interesting thing about the left brain is people do not make decisions with a left brain.
Correct. All
decisions are made right brain. So if we understand that our patients, regardless, and I practiced in a college town where we had more PhDs than any two towns in the United States, except Princeton, New Jersey, and Berkeley, California, Livermore, California. Engineers, PhDs in engineering, PhDs in nuclear science. I mean, these were scientists. And even scientists do not make logical decisions outside of their area of expertise. And a PhD just means they know more and more and more about less and less and less. In other words, they get very narrow in their knowledge base. And you take them outside of that knowledge base, like in a dental office, and the decisions are made emotionally. So it's very easy then to find out, okay, what I've got to do is find out what this patient wants, why they want it, and show them that we can do that without teaching them how to do it.
100%.
And simply ask the question, what would you like to do next? And listen. We're not trying, one of the things, my wife used to write a lot of articles for all the dental journals, and we published hundreds of these articles. And one time we published an article on the fact that I think every dentist believes that the patients should be able to make a decision for themselves. Right up until the time they make a dumb decision, at which point I'm going to try and educate them into submission.
Yeah.
In other words, the only reason, Ed, that you'd be saying no to these implants or whatever this treatment plan is you don't understand it. You don't know enough about it. So now that you've said no, I will now pull out all stops and I will educate you more, and then you'll accept it. And education doesn't work to help people make those decisions. It's you have to pull out the emotions and get the patient on that right brain, and there's where they make their decisions. And if you think about this, the biggest decision I've made in my life was to marry my wife. And I laugh about the fact, and we can laugh about this after 54 years. We've always laughed about it. I mean, think about this. I was a dental student. I was in debt. I was going to be in school for several more years, going further in debt. Then I'm going to go out and start a practice and go further in debt. And she made a decision to marry me at that point. Now, that was purely an emotional decision.
Yeah, 100%.
And for 54 years, she continued to look for data to support that decision.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, but here's how it works. She has filtered out any data that doesn't agree with that initial decision.
Yeah.
And that's how we make decisions.
Yeah. Confirmation bias is full in effect.
Yeah. And so it's the same with, let's take it back from a marriage. Let's take it back down to a single dental implant. It's the same thing. It's not about knowing about how to do the implant, which is what so many dentists spend their time on, with models and illustrations and tell me what you want. I want to be able to eat. I want to eat the foods I want. I want to bite into a good bone-in ribeye, and I want to taste it. And I want to be able to go out and laugh with my grandchildren and not be afraid that my denture is going to slip. I want to be able to enjoy that, and I want to be able to be comfortable. I don't like the chafing and the irritation that I get under the denture when I eat things with seeds in them and that sort of thing. And that's what they want.
Yeah.
And why do they want that? And get the reasons behind that. You know, it's like when I want to be able to laugh with my grandchildren, I'm going to find out how many grandchildren they have, how old they are, what their names are, what they do with their grandchildren. I mean, I'm going to have that patient living in their right brain. They're going to be living with their grandchildren as they speak to me, with me.
Yeah.
And when I present a solution to solve that problem for them, there is no pressure. There is no pressure.
No,
what would you like to do next?
You know, going back to the right brain for a moment, it's like, well, so Dr. Bill, I'm sitting here, everything you're saying to me speaks to me. I feel like I'm on I'm being a dentist right now. I'm on the treadmill. I'm driving down the highway. All the yellow flags are popping up. Like, he's describing my journey of growth, low profit, stress at home. My four walls are stressful. I'm showing up at home at 7:30. My day off on Friday is really not a day off. It just means it's a day I could work on extra office work. And I want to be the guy or gal who has the happy patients who accept high-end treatment, a team that is on board and supports. Because that was always the biggest question I'd get to, is like, how do we get the team on board? And I want to be one of your high profit, good growth practices. What do I do today? Like, how can I flip that? You know,
well, you can contact us for one. We'll help you.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
But I mean, that's the number one thing. I mean, that's what we do. We've done it for 40 years. And you know, can I back up a little bit and just talk about something I think is important here? When you describe that situation of a doctor working 4 or 5 days a week and going down on Saturdays and doing other things, you know, as you know, I worked with I've always worked with coaches most of my life. And one I worked with was Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach. And he has a term.
Amazing.
Called unique ability.
Yep.
And what does a dentist do? What is a dentist's unique ability? Your dentist's unique ability is diagnosing and treating patients. And to become highly profitable, you need a team of people around you that understands that. And in our first seminar with new doctors, I have all the doctors hold their hands up and I say, take a look at those, team. When those hands come out of the mouth, you're not getting your job done.
Yeah.
Because when those hands come out of the mouth, your little assembly line that produces your salary and your bonuses stop. And for the doctor, it runs backwards because the overhead continues. So what the doctor has to do is say, what is my unique ability? And what is it I do? And anything that takes them away from that is inefficiency. So we have to look at that.
I love this so much. I want to skip to one other topic before we wrap up. You have a term that I just absolutely love. I think of it all the time, and it's directly correlated to everyone being able to live their life that they were designed to live. And it is deserve level, a term you like to use, because you know, this is, I'm gonna set the context a little bit, because I know some of my past clients or people that are listening to this are like, this has been a great interview, even though we didn't go into like the hows of how to train, like the exact languaging, because that would take more time and it requires more people. But I think like at the end of the day, the decision point on like, okay, am I going to move down towards the road of high profit that I deserve, which might mean I need to start making these new rules in my life that impact other people, however it impacts them. Meaning I'm no longer doing the God a minute, no longer paying a salary to somebody who doesn't deserve one, right?
Right.
So if I want more profit, take advantage of my four walls in my house, I'm just setting the context up a little bit. At the end of the day, it becomes my own inadequacy issues, my own internal self-image issue, and my own agreement that either I made, like, well, I'm going to be the last one here, first one to get here. I've heard all the guys say that before. I said it creates a horrible context.
Yeah.
Whereas you're talking about ramp up the deserve level of what you deserve, because none of this other tactical stuff will work if that's not there.
That's right.
So I want to wrap up on this last topic. So let's give everyone your framework. I've never really heard you give the spiel. So
first off, it's a great concept. And what is amazing to me is what is the difference? I mean, what is the difference between people and how they live? And deserve level affects everything in our life. But how is it that some people just have this, they seem to live this wonderful life, and others always struggle? And when I worked with that psychiatrist way back, he started talking to us about, there were 4 other dentists and myself. I couldn't afford his hourly rate, so I got some friends to go in with me. And and so we worked with him twice a month, and it was supposed to be for 3 months. Well, it went on for 2 years, twice a month for 2 years. And it was a afternoon, evening session. And he's talked to us about deserve level. And we all live in a comfort zone. I'll give you kind of the short version, but we live in a comfort zone, and there's a floor. Now, and I'll use money as an example. We all have a comfort zone of a certain amount of money in our bank account. And if we drop down below that floor, we will do something about it. We will put more money in that account, or we will stop spending money, one or the other, where there's a level that we will not go below. Well, the scary part is there's also a ceiling on that, and we won't go above it. As a matter of fact, and I always use this as an example, you take professional athletes who have always been poor. I mean, they're not all poor, but many of them grow up very poor, and they sign a multi-million-dollar contract. And yet statistics show us in the NFL, the average player who leaves the NFL is broke 5 years after they leave the league. The NBA, it's 7 years. They had millions, but what do? It was out of that comfort zone, above that deserve level. And so what do? They get the million. They spend it as fast as they can. They buy a house in every city in the country. They buy a house for their mother and their girlfriends, and 10 cars, and they spend it, and they're broke. And so that's deserve level. Well, the problem is, and the reason we teach this and we put so much emphasis on this is to help people, our clients, identify their own deserve level. Now, the same psychiatrist said, you're born with this. You don't change your deserve level without professional help. And I always thought that was a little self-serving for a psychiatrist to say, you need to hire me to change.
Well, yeah, but there is reality of that external third disassociated party looking at their situation from a different perspective. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But he did say this: you can become aware of it.
Yeah.
And I've helped so many clients become aware of that ceiling. Yeah. And when you hit that ceiling and pull back, you actually sabotage yourself here to avoid breaking through that ceiling. Now, and I've done this myself. I can give you a case. I'm not going to spend the time on it today, but I can tell you in many areas of my life, I'll pull back just a little bit to get that back down where I'm comfortable. And dentists become very aware of this. And then what we do is we all do this. We then impose our deserve level on our patients. And so they don't present, now let's talk implants for a moment. They don't present the implants because, implants initially, the cost is a little higher than removable type prosthesis. Yeah. So we pull back and we don't present the implants because we didn't ask that budget question.
Yeah, and so everywhere you go, you're pulling back that based on your worldview,
on our own deserve level. And by the way, it's also very important for the team to understand this, because we very often hear from team members, Bill can't afford much. I happen to know Bill's family, and they really can't afford much. So doctor, don't present ideal treatment to Bill. He can't afford it. And besides that, Bill doesn't have any insurance. You can't do that. And we have to work on that, because you have to have a team of people around you. This is so important. You have to have a team that believes that what we do in this office is the biggest bargain in dentistry, the biggest bargain out there for these people to spend money on. You have to believe that this is the best thing. This is the best area for them to invest in their life. And if you don't believe that, then you probably need to find a new job. I mean, it's so simple.
Having the conversation about money instead of teeing up this long presentation that feeds the left brain to then be deflated. Whereas now, if we train the team properly, we got the doctor thinking properly, then we can open up the faucet of new patient flow coming in. And now you got an exponential result. But
unbelievable. If you start with, start with profitability.
Yeah.
You become profitable and then grow this practice, the exponential return is unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
But if you just grow for growth's sake, which I was doing, I was on that hamster wheel trying to outrun my overhead. It's hard and it doesn't have the rewards. But if you reverse that and become profitable, get your team and the doctor trained on how to have conversations with patients, then grow the new patient flow. Unbelievable. And I see new patients as they're the lifeblood of a practice. Yeah. And if you do that 80-20 spreadsheet, you will find your biggest cases actually do come from new patients, but you have to handle it right. Yeah. Well, it's been fun, Ed.
I think we could talk all day. It was great having you.
Thanks, Ed.
Bye, everybody.
If you like what you heard on today's show and are curious about how our systems can be customized for your practice, schedule a call to speak with one of our doctor coaches. Simply go to blatchford.com/call. No pressure, no BS, just an honest conversation to see if we can help you. Over the years, more than 4,000 dentists made this same call and discovered how Blatchford coaching transformed their profitability, their practice, and their lives. Go to blatchford.com/call. Thanks for listening.